This is The People's Project. I'm Monica Smith.
I'm Matt Wong, and we have a very good show for you today. We have special guests, Craig Kelly, Federal Member of Parliament and crowd favourite. We have Sanjeev Sabhlok. Now, he's the economist who resigned in protest from the Victorian Department of Treasury and Finance. He has a lot to say. We also have a doctor, a local GP, Catherine Fyans, and Mel from Digital Warfare. Good lineup.
Yeah, it's a great show. And before we get straight into it with Craig Kelly, I just want to make one comment about the Omnibus Bill. Most of our audience have heard about the Omnibus Bill, but funnily enough, they haven't heard about it because of the mainstream media. They've heard about it because of people like you, Matt, who made that amazing video.
Sure, and it shouldn't be me speaking, though. I'm a nobody, I'm not even a real lawyer, and we really need to hear more from the mainstream media, and thankfully we are now from the QCs and so on.
Yes.
But this truly is the scariest bill we've seen probably in Australia's history.
So I just find it very strange that it's not being talked about on a bigger scale. And, you know, Craig Kelly, he mentioned that if this was happening in Hong Kong, he thinks that the Australian media would be all over it. But this is happening in Australia and they're not talking about it. So that's something I found interesting. But look, we're going to get straight into Craig Kelly. Here he is.
Sitting as a member of Parliament is one of the greatest privileges that any Australian can have. I want to make sure that I can look upon the time I was there and not think, geez, why didn't I say that? Why did I go quiet on that? I should have spoken up louder about that. So, so I'm more than happy to argue different points and bring up different points. So I think that's a most important part of our democratic process.
Now, the Omnibus Bill.
When someone told me about it, I thought, that can't be right. You couldn't. They must have misinterpreted, or they must have mistaken. It can't be right. You can't. No democracy, I think, Western democracy in history has put a law before its parliament that would authorise basically a private militia to go and arrest people. I said, this cannot be right. So I said, I'm not going to comment on it until I've checked it myself because it just sounds wrong. And then I read it and I thought, my God, they've actually brought this into parliament. I can't believe what I'm reading. You're telling me under this law that actually what the Victorian government could do is appoint anyone. It could be a union official, or it could be the heavies of the CFMEU. It could be they could go and get the security contractors, whoever they want, and basically give them power to arrest anyone, and not if you've committed. And if you think that in itself is bad enough, right? It should be a lawful police officer has to arrest you if you're committing a crime against the statutes. And we've seen even how bad that is in Victoria at the moment, right? So, but they're going to allow anyone that they deputise to arrest you, and then basically detain you indefinitely. So at least if you get arrested at the moment, even by Victorian Police Force, you go down to the police station, you can get bail and you can get out, right? And then you've got to go before a judge. This would allow them to arrest you and detain you indefinitely without the right of bail, without seeing a judge. Right? Now, and then it gets worse. You don't even have to commit a crime. They've only got to think that you are thinking about committing a crime. Now, this is even George Orwell. This goes further than George Orwell's 1984. At least in his dystopian novel 1984, you had to actually commit a thought crime. That's where the word thought crime comes from, is where you think about you might be committing a crime, right? And they would put sensors on your head and you say, yes, you're thinking about committing a crime. Well, in Dan Andrews' case, they don't actually put the sensors on your head. A non-elected, anyone that Andrews appoints to give the power of arrest can think that you're thinking about it, whether you're thinking about it or not. So you may not even be you may not even be committing a thought crime. You may not be even thinking that you are going to commit a crime, which is, whether it's a crime or not, another issue. Whether those laws are constitutional is all another issue. But it's not whether you're actually thinking, it's whether they think that you are thinking about it.
Yeah.
Now this is against every single principle that every Australian that has gone to war and fought about. Like, we've got 100,000 Australians that gave up their lives to protect and fight against governments doing these things. Every day when I walk into the federal parliament, I look down, you look down across the strip there, you look down from Parliament, you look over Lake Burley Griffin, you look down Anzac Avenue, and you see the War Memorial down there. And that reminds you, 100,000 Australians gave their lives to protect our freedoms, to guarantee our freedoms. And then you see someone trying to bring regulation like this in Parliament. And then what's even worse, there's hardly a mention of this in the media. I looked last night. Where did we give the ABC $1.3 billion a year? That's $1,300 million. And I can't even see where they'd mentioned this. If this was the Chinese Communist government trying to bring in regulation like this into Hong Kong, right? The ABC would be all over it. And they'd be saying how outrageous it is that the Chinese government is doing these things. And how dare the poor people of Hong Kong now face arbitrary arrest, indefinite detention, not even by the police force, but by people appointed by the Communist Party of China. And there'd be outrage around the world. Amnesty International would be jumping up and down. Our human rights people would be jumping up and down. And yet this is happening in Victoria, and there's not a peep from these people.
Now, you have mentioned Victoria Police, but I know that you've been pretty heavy about sharing stuff online about it. So, I mean, if you had just one message to say to the Victoria Police, what would you say to them?
Well, firstly, I'd say I have been a great support. One of my jobs in Parliament is the chairman of the Law Enforcement Committee. And I have been a strong supporter of the police all the time. Wherever there's been an area of grey, I've always sided on the police's side because I know the great difficult job that they have. But what I'm seeing in Victoria, I'm sorry, I cannot support that. And what I would say is that there's like a social licence that exists in our society between the law enforcement officials and the public. And if the public think that the law enforcement officials are going to treat them with respect and courtesy and not subject them to arbitrary arrest and apply the benefit of reasonable doubt where things are, and that respect comes back from the people and the citizens to the police force. So it makes the job of being the police actually easier. If you're a police officer and you're walking down the streets and everyone's saying, hey, officer, how you going? Good on you, mate, how things, and look at you with a friendly smile, it makes your job easier. But if you're walking down the street and people look at you and they fear you and they step back, that makes your job as a police officer harder. And we're so lucky in Australia that we've had that great sort of circular relationship of trust in the police and the police trust in society. Now, there's always been a few problems here and there, but we've seen nothing like they have in America, where you've got large numbers of people calling out defund the police. And we don't have what it is like in a lot of South American countries where you're supposed to give the police a backhander, or a lot of what we saw in Eastern European countries when the war was up. When a lot of people that have migrated from Eastern Europe would see the police and they would fear the police because they know that they could be arbitrarily arrested and the police wouldn't treat them fairly. Now, we're so lucky in our society that relationship exists. Now, but what we are seeing in Victoria is the breakdown, the destruction of that relationship that has been built up over 100 years in this country. And irrespective of anything else, that will have long-term, serious, irreparable and unintended consequences, which will make our society worse. So look, I would call on the Victorian Police, and for goodness sake, firstly, think about the optics, the seniors, think about the optics of what you are doing. Now, I'm sure there's many people in the Victorian Police Force that are thinking the same thing. They're thinking, hang on a minute, they're going to go and watch this. What? I didn't sign up to the police. I didn't join the police force to go and arrest 70-year-old grandmothers. No. I didn't join up to the police force to break down people's doors and then to go and arrest pregnant mothers and slap them in handcuffs and have their children so frightened that their kids are hiding under the bed when I'm there. That's not why I joined the police force and swore an honour to uphold and protect the law. So I think it's not too far away. There's got to be some officers of good conscience. They're going to put what they believe in before and damn the consequences down the track. Stand on your conscience, stand on your principles, and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to support this, and go and stand with the protesters during one of these.
So I have 22,000 members, and a lot of them are finding it hard to stay positive. I'm doing my best to give them actions to make them feel purposeful and part of the solution. But if you had one message that you could give my members to perhaps look, it's okay to be scared. That's a good fear. A fear is a good motivator. But can you give us some direction on what we could do to help, and also just some hope if you can think of any? That would be really
okay. Firstly, what I do is say to anyone that's going through a tough time, hang in there, because you get to vote in. I think it's about 2 years. You get to vote against Daniel Andrews. Right? You get to pay him back at the ballot box, and you'll get to see him cop a hidey, right? So if you're doing it tough and you're thinking, what have I got to look forward to? You've got the writing is on the wall for that man. You've got to look forward to is when he is absolutely humiliated before the public. Forget all this, the polls and everyone supports him and all that. That's complete rubbish, right? Yeah. So hang in there and remember the enjoyment that you'll get on the day that he is forced to eat humble pie and is left with egg all over his face because of the catastrophic mistakes that he's done. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second I'd say, get involved in politics. Take an interest in it. Join. I'm not saying join a political party. It doesn't matter whether it's the party I represent or the National Party or even the Greens or the party. Join one of those political parties, because you find that these political parties are controlled by a very small number of people. And the more people that get involved in politics, the more people that join at the grassroots, the greater opportunity you've got to participate and have your say. I think that's also a very, very important point. The other thing I think that if you're looking for something positive to come out of this, I think people will understand how precious our freedoms are. Right? You've got my life. I'm never going to have to go and be conscripted and going to have to fight in a war and put a rifle over my shoulder and carry a bayonet and going to have to fight. That's something my generation has been spared from. And we take our peace, we take our freedom of speech and our rights. We become a bit blasé about them as though they just exist. Remember that if you look throughout all human history, the freedoms of speech and the rights that we have in the democratic processes only ever existed to a very small wafer thin, people throughout history, and that's us here today. And we've only had them because of the sacrifices, in blood, sweat, and tears and death that our previous generations have fought for. And freedom of speech our society is very, very, very fragile. These democratic processes and these freedoms that we have, that we enjoy, and we should never ever take them for granted. We've got to fight for them. We've got to protect them because they haven't come for free in the past, and we just can't take them for granted like we have. This is a great wake-up call, I think, to everyone, that we've got to stand up and we've got to fight for freedom of speech. We've got to fight for our liberties, because otherwise they can be whittled away very, very quickly. What I just say to everyone down there in Victoria are suffering. People around the country know how tough you're doing it. We're seeing a maniac that's taken control of the things, and without any thought of the consequences of the pain and suffering that's being caused to many people in small independent businesses. And look, I know up here in New South Wales, we feel your pain. We hear you calling out. We're doing as much as we can on the political side to put pressure on this. This can't go on forever. It won't. And as I said, just remember, hang in there, right? Because in the future, you're going to see this man, Dan Andrews, with egg all over his face, and you have to eat humble pie. And that's something you've got to look forward to. You certainly don't want to miss out on that.
That's the first time I've seen that interview, Monica. You did a really good job.
Well, Craig Kelly is very easy to interview. His genuine character comes across so easily, I think, and the things that he said. I mean, I'm just so glad that he's rooting for us. And, he's like the most famous MP in Australia. He
is. And very heartfelt. Did he make you cry?
I did get quite emotional after the interview. Just being able to interview someone like him, it felt very real to me.
Do you know why he feels so real? It's because he's not like the usual Labor Party who have come up through unions or Liberal who had come from law school. He was just a guy in family business.
Yes.
And in fact, people have a go at him for just being just a family business guy. But I think he's the best type of politician we could have.
Have a go. It's like when you're a boss and you start from the bottom so that you understand what your employees are up against. That's what he did.
Yeah.
Trained politicians are very dangerous.
Right, and that's probably why he gets into trouble, but we love him. We think he's great.
I love it.
Let's talk about our next guest. So Dr. Catherine Fyans is a local GP here in Melbourne, and we had a chat with her earlier today, and it was quite interesting. She has a good pulse on the community and what's happening out there in practice. And she talked a lot about cases. What does that mean? Because now we're not measuring deaths and morbid outcomes, we're measuring cases. So here's what Dr. Fyans had to say.
We're really lucky to have Catherine, who is a local GP, come on the show with us. And hasn't it been great to meet Catherine, Matt?
Very good. In fact, there's been a lot of talk about cases and the way we're measuring the response to coronavirus. So we thought it'd be interesting to ask you, Doctor, exactly why we are changing from... I thought we should have been measuring morbid outcomes with coronavirus, but we seem to now be focused purely on cases.
Exactly.
What are we actually measuring?
Exactly. So I've always known a case to be someone with a medical condition or a disease, so a disease process. Now, the way that cases is being used now, it's referring to a positive test result.
Right.
I even asked the Australian Government Department of Health, what is a case? And they said, quote unquote, it's a positive COVID-19 test result. My understanding is that COVID-19 is a disease, the disease process, and it can be backed by test results, but a disease is not a test result. Right. Now, my concern is that we're given a fairly misleading and alarming picture of what's going on when we keep on hearing about cases. And I've never, ever, in 40 years of practice, known there to be such a fervent push for testing the general public, nor quarantining the healthy, I might add. So what we need to know is, out of the number of cases, well, firstly, how many people are being tested?
Yes.
How many cases out of the number are being tested? How many of them are actually significantly unwell? And how many, sadly, would have succumbed? If we don't have the context and we just hear these numbers of test results, it can give a very misleading picture of what's going on. Because a lot of people might assume a case means someone significantly unwell, and it creates alarm.
That's what
that's what I thought.
Exactly.
So so you're saying that a positive COVID test, what does that actually mean then?
Well, exactly. And as I said, I did ask the Australian Government Department of Health what is the case, and they said positive COVID-19 test result. So the test that is used is a reverse transcriptase PCR test, which everyone's heard of now. And it's not even testing the virus, it's testing amplified genetic material that's meant to represent the virus.
Right.
And of course, like any test, there can be false positives. Yeah. So a lot of these people who are being tested are perfectly well and or have mild or little symptoms. So that's what we need to know, how many people are unwell, not test results.
And why do you think that they are pushing to get tested so much? I mean, I've seen billboards just everywhere where I live. So I can't imagine how much they're spending on the billboards and the messaging around it.
Yes.
Why do they want us to get tested so badly?
Well, exactly. And firstly, why have we never done this before? We know that influenza, and particularly last year and in 2017, had a very significant morbidity and mortality rate. Why have we not done that before? Why this year with this virus? Now, we know that, as far as I am aware, the lockdowns are on the basis of the number of cases.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
The roadmap out.
The roadmap out.
The roadmap.
Yes, and the latest I heard, it's 5 or less cases per day for 2 consecutive weeks before we can be released. Not going to happen. I just cannot see that we would get down to 0 cases. That alarms me. We need to look, as you said, at how many people are unwell from this condition, not how many people are testing positive on a test that is not even testing directly for the virus. Now, we're already in level 4, stage 4 lockdown.
Yes.
So what's next? What's next? I mean, it's not like they're going to be handing out hydroxychloroquine if we have a positive test result. are they?
If the projection is that we won't change our situation until we have under 5 cases, are you basically saying if that stays the same, if that projection stays the same, we're just not going to get out of stage 4 lockdown?
Well, it's not for me to say. I just am raising the question.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea of totally eliminating a single virus out of trillions, to me, is a complete misconception. It's not a matter of totally eliminating the virus. It's actually learning to live with the virus, because we're in a sea of microbiomes in our environment, in our bodies, on our bodies. Trillions.
I thought it was just COVID now.
Sorry. Well,
Sorry.
it's quite
Went from serious
intriguing
to a
that
joke,
we
but-
have this myopic obsession on this one virus, and it's almost like every other health concern has gone out the window,
Right.
and that alarms me greatly, being a doctor, that people are not looking at other areas of their health. They're not having their normal health checks. The other thing is that the message we're getting is that we can, by mechanical means, block out a virus. We're talking about a particle that's nanometers in size, and that's a billionth of a metre.
Billionth of
You know,
a metre.
even the mask, the perspex, the gloves. I did hear someone refer to the mask stopping the virus like throwing sand at a chain fence. A little bit will stick, but most will get through. Now, this has been going on for months now, and for how much longer? Why aren't we getting messages also about how we can improve our general health? Because at the end of the day, health and healing is an inside job. We can't completely control the external environment. Put that emphasis on, we control that there, don't worry about what's going on in here.
Actually, as a GP, can I just, we don't spend too much time on it, but can you give our audience just 30 seconds or a minute of some really practical things they can do in their homes right now to improve their immune system and their health around what's going on?
Yes, I can. The problem is being in the home for so long.
Okay.
Like we're
So go
allowed out,
outside.
an hour, 2 now?
2 now.
Yeah.
And my concern about everything that's been suggested is artificial. And what we're getting the message generally that we can't trust nature, we can't trust the wisdom of our own bodies, we just have to block out the virus, and we can't trust the wisdom of ourselves particularly. So sure, there are things people can do. Obviously eating well is the start.
Yes.
Exercising regularly is good. Maintaining some sort of normality, finding some joy, because those endorphins of joy, they are healthful.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about, it's politically incorrect to talk about lifestyle, but lifestyle does come into the equation, and so does life years lost.
Yeah.
It's not all about survival, but we've had this focus on the virus, survival, and the rest.
It feels like we've been turned into a state of germaphobes.
Yes.
There's a lot of fear going on.
Exactly. Look, what I have observed is that we've become a culture of fear, and we've been trained to be germ-phobic. Sure, we should be respectful of pathogens, and I'm all for common sense measures to help mitigate the spread of the virus or pathogen. But crossing that line from what is common sense and reasonable to what is ridiculous is a whole different question.
How do you feel about the fear around this?
What I'm observing?
Yes.
As I said, we've become a culture of fear. And I know what fear does to the body in the long term. So fear's a powerful motivator in the short term.
Sure.
Absolutely. In the long term, it is not consistent with health. It cannot be. The energies are disparate. And a lot of people, for a variety of reasons, are in that high fear state. The other thing about fear is that when we're in that survival mode, which is a primal state that we all share.
Yes.
But when we're overtaken by it, our brain defaults to the emotional brain, the limbic system, at the expense of our prefrontal cortices. So we don't think as straight when we're in that state. The funny thing also is that people become addicted to the fear hormones, the fear
Really?
chemicals.
I didn't know it was addictive.
Well, this is subconscious, and I'm not blaming anyone. This is just
Sure.
how it works.
Yeah.
So survival fear is designed for very short-term survival. Like you're running away from a tiger, you're crossing the road, a car comes careering around. We want that quick survival fear to jump in to save us. We need it. It keeps us alive.
Yes.
But when it's maintained for months on end, I know what that does to the body. And these constant fear messages, cases, the mask gives us an image that we're not safe, we can't trust our bodies. And I'm very concerned about the image that's given to children because they're much more impressionable.
This is very convenient, though, from a political perspective. Fear is the best way to get your political agenda through.
Yes.
So what do you think we can do from your perspective? I mean, within the bounds of what we're allowed to do, how can we come out of this?
Well, I think firstly, we need to ask ourselves a question. What are we willing to trade for promises of physical safety and security? Illusion though it is, because no one can promise us that. And we've seen that people are willing to trade a lot. But when we ask that question, what are we willing to trade, that is the point where we're utterly controllable.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that because what happens when people are in that, survival fear state for long, they're looking for the external saviour, the authority, including the medical profession, I might add, that will say, I'll look after you. It's actually quite an infantile state. Now, I'm not blaming anyone, it's just how the brain works.
Yes, it's science, really.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know if I answered your question, Matt.
No, you have.
Okay.
We need to resist that infantile state and take responsibility for being a bit more adult, I think is what you're trying to say.
Look, quite frankly, it's time we grew up. I think the days where we blindly trusted the authorities, and I'm not saying we don't trust some authorities, of course we do, but blindly trusting that someone else has the answer for us, I think those days are gone.
Well,
I really do.
I think people need to do their own research as much as they can independently, and I think people need to try and turn off the mainstream media. Don't you think, Matt?
Tune into
the People's Project, because we tell the truth here. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on, Catherine. We really appreciate
for the work you're both doing.
Voice from a GP. I mean, we're very lucky to have you, so thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
It was so great to hear from Dr. Catherine because she has a perspective that I haven't heard before.
She does. It should be normal. She's just talking about how medicine has operated for the last 40 years in her practice. But she's so warm. She's the type of GP I want. Yeah, I think she lives about an hour away, but when we're allowed to actually go 5 kilometres away, I might go all the way there just to see her as my GP. Yes, and she genuinely cares about people, and I think that's what GPs should be like. Anyway, we're going to go to our next guest, which is Mel from Digital Warfare. Yay. And here she is. Mel from Digital Warfare has joined us here today, which is really exciting. Now, the reason I'm really excited for you to be here is that we kind of did the same thing but different. So Reignite Democracy Australia was all about a legal way to protest because it's illegal to protest. So I was like, the people need a way to let out their feelings and emotions. And so that's why I started it. And then you started your platform and I was like, oh, I've got to meet this girl. So here you are. And what you do on Digital Warfare is you direct your members to a particular social media page or event at a particular time, and you instruct them how to talk and what the mission is, right? And it's all very above board. There's no conspiracies, there's no nothing. It's very polite, it's respectful. That's why I wanted to align with you, because I feel like we agree on that. And so what there's a lot of people that could be doing what you're doing, but you are doing it. So why you?
I don't know, I guess I had an idea much similar to you guys. Like I was obviously getting a bit emotional and there's a lot of things happening and I wanted to kind of speak out about these things, and I kind of thought, well, how can I do that? So I jumped on social media and found that, there was a lot of other people doing that. So I thought, why not streamline it and kind of form a bit of a community where people can, like-minded people can come together and really get their voice heard. And so we've created events and we really try and work hard to obviously get that message out there.
And it's called Digital Warfare, just so that you know.
Digital warfare, yeah. So we're waging war digitally.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Luke Cornelius told us to do that. You saw that?
He did.
The Deputy Commissioner. He said, by all means, be the keyboard warrior.
Well, we're doing that.
We are.
Yeah.
Well, why not? You are.
Well, yeah, there's quite a few of us.
Yeah,
so
there is over 6,000.
There's over 6,000 now.
Yeah, we need to double that.
We do.
It's funny. People look at these groups, things that I've started, Mon started, you've started, and they kind of think, oh, they're influencers or they're popular people or they're special somehow. But I'm intrigued about how normal you are.
I wouldn't say that I'm special or an influencer at all.
Right.
I'm just me and 3 other girls that run this. We're just really normal, everyday people, you know, like I have a job, a family, the girls have been impacted by these lockdowns. We've just kind of come together and formed a group, you know, like we're just, definitely nothing special at all. Anyone can give this a go. And
well, what would you say to people to try and encourage them to take their own character to create something that gives them purpose as well at this time?
I guess, like, I find a lot of people kind of coming to me and saying, oh, hey, Mel, why don't we do this or why don't we do that? And I kind of think, well, I'm more than happy to support you, don't get me wrong, but you know what? Why don't you take your idea and run with it, you know? Because I had an idea and look where, like, I'm sitting here now talking to you guys. So, you know, take your idea and run with it because you don't really know where it can end up. So...
Such good advice. And, you know, you've done something pretty special this week. You have gone and created something very new, just a short video, which we're going to play right now. And that's a bit of a passion project for you, isn't it?
Well, yeah, like I'd really been trying hard to kind of get these messages out there, and I'd been writing a lot of things, and I found that not too many people, I don't think, were reading it, so I kind of thought maybe I'll try and visualise that. So I've never made a video before either, guys, so I just kind of taught myself how to do it, and
what's the mission of the video's message?
So the main message, I think, is that there's a lot of harm that's coming from these lockdowns. You know, there's a lot of different ways that people are being impacted, and I really wanted to highlight, you know, those issues and really bring them to life to make people understand that it's not just as simple as stay home. Not everyone can do that.
Yeah, easily. And before we play the video, I just wanted to say as well, you had a big win this week. Craig Kelly shared one of your posts. I mean, he's like our hero. And Craig's actually on this show as well. So I thought that was a cool little thing to make. But we are going to play the video now. And thank you so much for the work that you've done. And this video is kind of like a collection, I think, of your passion and your emotions behind it. And I think we really do need to think about what's behind closed doors more so that we can have more empathy for what's going on. So we're going to play that video now. So who's next?
All right, so this is my favourite guest of the night. Now,
Craig.
Sorry, Craig. Sanjeev Sabhlok is an incredible man. So you may have heard in the news that there is an economist who resigned in protest from the Victorian Department of Treasury and Finance. So it's this public servant who wants to speak out. He says a little bit in the interview about why, but basically he put some social media posts on and they wanted him to take it down. And all he's arguing for is for the dignity and the welfare of people in this state. So the full interview we'll put online later on. It's about 20 minutes long. But in this one, you'll see he's got such a heart for people. This is what I think we don't understand. Economists actually care about people, not just money. And the thing that comes...
Interesting.
The thing that comes across from this guy is he was so disgusted in the way that people are being treated in the state that he had to speak up. And you'll see in the full interview that he actually finds the whole thing to be abhorrent, that we are killing people with our policies, when his whole goal as an economist is to save people.
That's amazing. I really hope that his story somehow gives leeway for other people to protest in this way. I think people are really scared of losing their jobs, but what they don't realise is actually the outcome of doing something like that he's done, the feeling of fulfilment that you get from doing something like that, I think is more important than a paycheck.
Well, interesting. He actually said to me that something like 90-something% of the people in the Treasury feel the way he does. So
Where are the rest of them?
Right. This is very encouraging, though, that deep within the bowels of our government, they are actually providing advice which is being ignored, of course, by the Andrews government. But there is a lot of people on the inside who are saying we are causing too much damage with these lockdowns.
Well, I'm waiting for. I'd love to. I can't wait for the bubble to burst.
Well, I think it's bursting. We've got the QCs coming out this week. We've got
That's
former
true.
High Court Judge Michael McHugh saying it's all wrong.
There's some momentum. Can I just say before we go into Sanjeev that when I was interviewing Craig Kelly, he actually mentioned Sanjeev, not knowing that he was going to be on the show.
Yeah.
And he said that he wants to get a photo of him framed on his wall.
That high.
He said that Sanjeev is his new hero.
All right. Well, let's have a look at this interview with the self-proclaimed Pope of Liberty.
Love it.
Pope of Liberty. Here is Sanjeev Sabhlok. Sanjeev, you're a very interesting individual because I think you're all over the news at the moment. Your story in particular, as I mentioned, you were previously in the Victorian Department of Finance and Treasury as an economist. Is that right?
Yeah, I worked there till the 10th was my last day. So I resigned on the 9th evening and I handed over all my pass and laptop and everything on the 10th. So that was just recently. Yes.
Sanjeev, that's a very big move to resign in an economic climate like this. Why did you take such a risk?
Well, it's not a risk really in the financial sense because, I will be in a few years getting the age pension. So, I will be protected by the age pension. So it's basically not a financial risk, a very significant one, but it's a very significant point for me to not be suppressed, my voice not be suppressed in this environment. And I think the social media voice that I had on this issue, which was very mildly critical of the government initially, I think at some stage became more critical. And so it is not sustainable. I just had to leave. Yeah. So they asked me to remove those posts, which are both indirectly critical. And I think they're wrong in asking for that. But I think that's not really the issue. I think the issue was that I had to leave and make my protest as a citizen. Yeah.
The fact that you were working inside our government Treasury Department, how many other people inside do you think share your views?
I would say practically all. In the Treasury have a very strong proclivity towards good policy. And that good policy, by the way, means minimal intervention of the government. But I would say a very large number of people in the Treasury. And that's actually, if you think about economics as a discipline, it actually is founded on the idea of everyone individually maximizing their budget constraint and utility and all that stuff. So you don't have in economics the idea of statism. There is no role for the state in economics. The state only comes in when there's a market failure. So the economics fundamentally is what you call a libertarian discipline. Anyone who's done that will actually come out saying, hey, why are you not letting people do what they want?
Okay. So obviously, when you say one or two in Victoria, how many of you are there?
The Treasury, I think, is about 800 people. A large number of them are professionals from different areas, including finance and law and commercial management of just management and so on, and HR, etc. But that's the bulk of the people. And then we have about 100 odd economists who are in the economic division, reporting to a deputy secretary, who's the second in, there are, I think, 4 or 5 deputy secretaries in the Treasury. And so the economic area has about 100 odd people who are paid by the taxpayer to advise on everything that goes to cabinet. So there are very few ministers' eyes-only submissions. But everything else, there are economists advising the treasurer or the assistant treasurer on different issues from the economic perspective.
Okay. All right. Well, Sanjeev, can you give us a brief summary of what your main complaint is at the moment and what you think we should be doing? And keeping in mind that this is, you're saying the majority view of most in the Victorian Treasury.
I think virtually everybody in DTF, virtually everybody in the entire economic world will support what I'm saying, that there has to be a proper analysis of this policy. Every policy requires a transparent consultative process where you actually say, these are the kind of problems we're facing. These are the kinds of options we have. These are the trade-offs between different options. And so finally we pick an option and then we update that. So what I'm only saying is a really technical policy-making thing that was not done in this case. So I think in the guise of emergency, there was a short-circuiting of the fundamental process of good policy making, which I'm writing about in the Fin Review and also in a few other papers that I'll be writing. So the argument, my complaint is really that as I keep saying, I would not mind not just stage 4, but you can put me into solitary confinement and the whole society into solitary confinement. I would not mind it theoretically. Okay, I'm not an extremist for liberty. Right. I would not mind it theoretically if you prove to me That's the only way to actually get the outcome that you want.
And you're saying that's not the only way?
What I'm saying is they have not even demonstrated slightly or even remotely that the lockdown was even anywhere close, required to so-called flatten the curve, which was the original idea. Yes. We suppress it, we ensure that the ICU are not overflooded, and so at that point we just had to manage the social distancing in such a way that we would have reasonable capacity, surplus capacity in ICUs. But we did not do that. We went to the crazy idea of eradication. A virus cannot be eradicated from planet Earth, guys. This is the stupidest thing in the world that they have thought about. And then you're forced to depend upon a vaccine. Now, even if that was the case, they needed to put out all that logic in the media, in the public domain, and they did not. So the argument here I make is that they went straight into the completely indefensible lockdown. So lockdowns were not defensible under any circumstances, given the information, even if it was a Spanish flu. And in the Spanish flu as well, we never had lockdowns anywhere in the world. But at the end of the day, this after 4 months, or actually less than 4 months of data, just 2 months of data, I would say, we found that this was not killing anywhere close to what Spanish flu would kill. So, Sweden example was 85,000, 90,000 would die by April, but actually almost 3,000 died. And so this was where the data was coming in that this is not anywhere close to that, So what we're trying to do here is to deal with, as I call a sledgehammer, yes. And try to kill a swarm of mosquitoes. Now these are the virus, and instead of actually having a bit of a targeted spray where there's a little bit more and do a bit of that. So there's no targeting, there's no risk-based assessment, there's no risk-based regulation making, there's no performance-based regulation making, there's a complete distrust of the public, there is no explanation for why they put out different requirements like the lockdowns or the masks masks in the open. By the way, I'm quite okay with masks indoor when you're interacting with people, but the justifications that were required for everything, and they refused to answer. So I was getting really aggravated, and the worst thing was that at the end of the day, on the basis of protecting us from somebody who's walking on the road, a girl, let's say, was walking on the road without a mask, and so in the guise of protecting me from that girl getting a virus spreading the virus in the open air, which is not impossible, the police started choking her throat. That really got me. Okay, so I don't think this is about libertarianism. I don't think this is about economics. This is about hardcore basic dignity as an individual. We do not live in a society like this and sit and take this, without any protest. So I was making these comments in the social media, which DTF asked me to remove, and I decided I will not remove my comments because of these kind of things. I call them crimes against humanity. I call them terrorism. I call them public health terrorism. And this is a wonderful thing because from the interview I think you did with Imon, I discovered that this word that he said, the policies are terrorizing the patients. And I said, my God, this is exactly what they're doing. This is public health terrorism. So I'm actually calling this, and I'll write about this. But this is where you see this is nothing to do with libertarianism. This is about fundamental dignity as an individual, right? We are not. We need to know why our servant, the government, is our servant. We all pay for taxes for the government. We employ the government. We need to know why a government is doing certain things to restrict our liberties, and if it's done reasonably, a seatbelt, for example, with explanation, etc., we comply. We are very obedient people. We're all law-abiding people, and I'm still not asking anyone to break the law. Despite my objections, I've repeatedly said, do not break the law, but protest, but ask questions.
Okay, so this sledgehammer, though, is not only destroying our dignity, it's actually destroying lives. And you've been good at documenting this because economics is not just about money, isn't it? We're talking about quality of life indicators, total aggregate human welfare.
Absolutely. Economics is the most broadest discipline that applies a very analytical and critical thought to the entire society. It looks at the visible and the invisible. And that is why I call my book for children, which I've written for economics for children, Seeing the Invisible. Economists are taught to be like detectives. We look right behind the scene to see what's going to happen here and there. When we see that maternal stillbirths have increased dramatically, what have we done? We've actually killed a lot of people who would have otherwise been born. That's happened in many parts of the world. We are seeing a lot of people having Alzheimer's, Parkinson's diagnosis likely to increase, cancer diagnosis, cancer deaths likely to increase. We're seeing suicides in India. At least 50,000 more suicides have happened because of lockdowns, and the numbers here are a bit less because there was a lot of welfare going on, but I still think there will be a significant impact in the end. And we also have children harming themselves. All that stuff, by the way, is valued. Now, here's the problem. When economists will say we are actually going to value it quantitatively, people get really upset. But when you're doing analysis of different things, you have to weight them in a certain way. Yes. The death of a 90-year-old person from a COVID virus, yes, who would have otherwise died maybe 3 months later, is probably less valuable than than the life of somebody who's not is not even allowed to be born, like a stillbirth. So what are we talking about? We have to put some values, and that's exactly what economics does. We put statistical values on life. We put analysis on the quals, we call them. So the idea is that we need to have this analysis, because there are trade-offs. And worst of all, I really don't agree with any approach where a public health directive goes and kills additional people.
Right.
It is critical that we do not kill more people in order to save us.
Right.
Because that is plain murder. I mean, I don't know what murder is, but I'm not a legal guy, but maybe that's not murder. Maybe it's homicide. Maybe it's manslaughter. Maybe whatever it is. It's a crime. When extra people are being killed because of these lockdowns, I think that's a very serious matter. 6 months down the road, these guys have done nothing of the sort. I have no idea what's the logic that's driving them to have the curfews. I have no idea why they're beating up people and bashing their heads. I have no idea why Dan Andrews is not objecting. I have no idea why the entire cabinet of Dan Andrews is sitting tight and supporting him. I have no idea why the Liberal Party actually did not come out strongly and fight these lockdowns. I've actually had this problem with my own local representative, Matthew Guy. I raised the matters with him because I thought, in a democracy, raise that with your local MP, and he did not raise the matter. He blocked me on Twitter. My point is that all over the world, we're seeing complete stunned silence. Sorry, but we're supposed to be a free society. We're supposed to have a good policy framework. We're really good. Australia is really great at good policy making, and now we have this situation where you really need good policy making, and you throw it all in the wind and just forget about it. I really don't think that's a good idea.
Okay, and what can we all do, the normal people?
I think I've made two suggestions. One is we need to organize ourselves. Now, I'm a free citizen. I'm happy to be part of that organization where we will demand a referendum in Victoria and eliminate all the emergency powers. The whole thing happened because there was this emergency power. And these guys then were able to throw this caution and policy process in the wind. And we want to remove that power, because that is how Sweden managed this whole thing without destroying the basic liberties of its people, because its constitution does not permit them to have an emergency power except in war. So they can't restrict your liberty at all under the constitution. So and in fact, if they issue an order, it has to be individually based. You can't just have a society-wide order, 5 kilometers, you can't get out of the place. No, that's not allowed, okay? So what we see, what we want here in Victoria is the elimination. We do not trust seeing the behavior and performance of Dan Andrews and his Star Chamber, completely tightly held organization at the top where there's no consultation. We don't trust these guys anymore. Let's not have this power given to anybody in during the times where we are not directly under war. In war, by all means, Victoria should have that power. But that's the first. The second one, I think we need a law immediately which will punish either by jail or whatever. I won't go into details. I'm got really angry about this thing. But let's say we need a law which will punish any minister or any bureaucrat or anybody who issues orders that will actually kill more people in the name of public health. So we want to stop this public health terrorism and actually call it for what it is and write it down and say any public health terrorist shall be punished like any other terrorist. These guys are terrorizing the people who are not going and getting themselves tested. They are terrorizing people who are under depression. They are terrorizing people who are children who are doing self-harm. They are terrorists. Let's call it for what it is. And we have a law against public health terrorism. So that's the second main point.
Very good. Thank you for your work, Sanjeev. All right, everyone, you can follow him on any of the social platforms. Just put his name in there. There you have it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Matt. And thank you for having me and really doing all the good work you're doing. Thank you.
I love Sanjeev.
Craig Kelly loves Sanjeev. We love Sanjeev. He's a hero.
I didn't realize economists had such big hearts. Yeah.
There are people like that everywhere. They just need a voice. And I think that we would love to give more people like him a voice on this show. Look, I'm going to talk about campaigns. I always talk about campaigns because there's always something going on, and there's even more going on than you realise. But, with the council elections coming up, the Omnibus Bill coming up, now Reignite Democracy Australia has the biggest three-prong approach to the Omnibus Bill that I think Victoria has ever seen.
Kill it.
We've got letterbox drops, we've got radio, we've got talkback, we've got so much going on. So please keep checking up the Reignite Democracy Australia Facebook page and the website. Everything's been updated, and we're going to absolutely smash this campaign out of the war. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, and we're going to treat it like that. So the next 2.5 weeks, you guys better be ready.
For what? For war?
For all the campaigns.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll get my protest on. My digital protest on. So what else? Hey, we are always buying batteries and stuff like that when you buy a new tripod. If you have connections out there, someone who works at JB Hi-Fi or, I don't know, just somewhere where we can get staff discounts, it would really help us because we need to buy things like, a a new tripod, for example.
And we want this to get better and better and better. And Matt's already spent a lot of money on the studio.
Thousands.
You know,
but that's not the point. You know, we're going to do this no matter what. But if you have a connection out there that can help us get staff pricing on things, you know, we need a new computer to render our Premiere videos, please let us know.
And next week, shall we talk about next week? So, look, we've had some really great guests on.
Yes.
This week, last week, the week before. This is only our third show, by the way. So, if the caliber of guests keep getting better, we're going to have a really fantastic show. But the only reason we have a show is not because of you, Matt, even though you're great. It's not because of me either. It's because of you guys out there watching.
It is true. It is true.
They wouldn't want to come on if we didn't have an audience.
No, literally, you understand, when we call these people, they look at the numbers and they see that you're sharing our show, you're commenting and liking on our posts, and they're saying, yes, we'd like to come on. So keep doing it.
Yes.
Share this show, and we're going to take over the show not to be mentioned on Channel 10.
Anyway, no, but if you guys have some connections with some high-profile names, if you have ideas, we'd really love to get a QC on board. Just anyone that has a message to share. And I think Sanjeev, what he did was so heroic, but if he wasn't able to share his story, it would have been for nothing. And we would like to share stories like that. So please message us, email us, and get in touch with us, and we'll help you spread the message, won't we?
Yeah, and thank you for supporting our show.
Yeah,
See you next week.
Bye.